Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi Pesachim, 1 week at a time. This is our penultimate shiur for Masechet Pesachim. Just a reminder that next week we will be completing Masechet Pesachim together. We will be having shiur in our regular time and day. On Tuesday, even though we will be finishing Pesachim on Monday. So we will celebrate together. I encourage everyone next week, please bring something to celebrate our siyum together, whether it's a drink, we can make a l'chaim, or some cake. I don't know, in your pre-Pesach cooking, maybe not, but we will, Be'ezrat Hashem, celebrate next week. And okay, let's get started. Today is our 17th lecture, shiur. And as I mentioned, this week we will be reviewing Daf 109, Kuf Tet, through 115, Kuf Tet Vav, which was today's Daf. And we have a lot to talk about. I would imagine, this week has had some interesting topics, including demons and witches and all different interesting things. So let's get started, and we'll try. And then, as promised, towards the end of the shiur, we will get back to, I would say, more practical applications, some more practical advice for our Seder and a way to enhance our Pesach this year, Be'ezrat Hashem. So that's more towards the end of this shiur. So let's begin. Daf 109, we have this idea, and we will see this throughout our shiur today, that the importance of keeping the children awake at the Seder. I think for most of us, by Seder, we'll have changed our clocks, which means Seder does start quite late. But everything that we're going to be discussing throughout the Seder is meant to encourage the children to ask questions, to be involved, to stay awake, to be active participants in the Seder, and that is very, very important. So Daf 109 describes that Rabbi Akiva would give out nuts for the children to stay awake. We actually had a minhag for a few years to give out marshmallows. They're much easier to throw. They hurt less. But giving out marshmallows to kids is a good way to keep them awake. So that is, it goes all the way back to Rabbi Akiva trying to keep the children awake at his Seder. Okay, and again, the idea that we remove the table, we cover things, we bring them back, again, to arouse suspicion, to get the children to ask questions. The Gemara describes, I thought this was so beautiful, that the students were sent home from the Beit Midrash, from the study hall, on 2 days of the year. One is early on Erev Pesach, so that the fathers can put their children to bed on Erev Pesach, so that they can all go take naps. And on Erev Yom Kippur, so that the fathers can feed their children. So I thought that this was really a beautiful idea, and we see that even the Gemara is encouraging the fathers to be involved in these preparations for the holiday as well. Another idea that the Gemara mentions is that it's important to gladden the people in the household. Again, we say v'samachtem, v'samachta b'chagecha. It's important to be happy, sameach, on the holiday. Again, all 3 holidays, meaning Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. The Gemara asks, how are we happy? How are we meant to gladden the people around us? The Gemara says for men, it's about wine. During the time of the Beit HaMikdash, it was about eating the meat of the korban. And for women, it's about buying new clothes. So if you think that your mother made up this minhag, she didn't. It actually comes from the Gemara. There is this idea of buying something new for the Chag. And this is meant to make everybody in the house excited that it is a festival. Okay, from here, last week we mentioned, I again have a lot of pictures for you. Again, this is from Daf HaChaim, a really great website. I encourage you to check it out. But here I brought you quite a few pictures this week, just to kind of visualize the things that we're talking about. So last week we talked about the four cups and how each cup needs to be a revi'it. A revi'it is a quarter of a log, again, a type of a measurement. And here the Gemara discusses how do we figure out how much is in this revi'it, and they compare it to figuring out what is the measurement for a mikvah. So you can see here the minimum of a mikvah is what's, you can see here it's 1 by 1 by 3, meaning 1 amah by 1 amah by 3 amah. If anybody's been to a mikvah, they are generally not this tube shape, but that is the minimum amount of water you need. And as you can see here, the reason is the Gemara explains that a person needs to be able to immerse completely at one time. And this 1 by 1 by 3 amma, if you fill it up with water, is what we call 40 se'ah, which is the minimum amount that we need for a mikvah. From here, since we're talking about a mikvah, interestingly enough, the Gemara talks about the shulchan, the table. We actually mentioned this in last week's Parshat Shavua. We read about all the different vessels in the tabernacle, in the Mishkan. One of them is the table for the showbread, for the lechem hapanim. And the Gemara says, hold on, the shulchan, the table, must have been made with detachable parts so that it could be taken apart and immersed in the mikvah. Again, if the mikvah is 1 by 1 by 3, this large shulchan would not have been able to been immersed. The Gemara says, no, we can't learn from that because if you're familiar, at least in the Beit HaMikdash, there was something called the Yam Shel Shlomo. It was a large basin of water. If you've seen pictures, it actually had, not real pictures, but images. It had 12 oxen, like statues of 12 oxen with a big basin on top. That was called Yam Shel Shlomo. It was huge. And the Gemara says, well, the shulchan was, you could have like picked it up and put it in there in order to put it in the mikvah. So we do not really learn the minimum amount or volume that a mikvah needs to be from the shulchan. Okay, from here, we're going to get into an interesting discussion about pairs, zugot. Pairs seem to be susceptible to witchcraft or demons. The Gemara says that you should not eat or drink in pairs. And then the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, how are we, and this is why we brought it up, right? How are you going to drink 4 cups of wine at Seder night? It's very dangerous to have 2 pairs of wine to drink. The Gemara says, don't worry. There are 3 reasons. One is that Pesach is called Leil Shimurim, the night that we are watched over or guarded. Therefore, God is guarding us on that night, and therefore spirits do not have any power over us. The other is that, yes, there are 4 cups, but really it's 3 plus 1, and therefore, because we have Birkat Hamazon for the 3rd cup, it kind of intercedes and breaks it up. Instead of 2 and 2, it's actually 3 and 1, and therefore it's okay. Or really 4 cups, each one is a unique commandment or a unique mitzvah. We're now at the top of Daf 110 of Kuf Yud. And when we think about each cup, and we'll go through each one of them, but again, the first one is Kiddush. We're sanctifying the day. or the night, but the day. The next one is Magid. We tell the story of Yitziat Mitzrayim, of the Exodus from Egypt, over the second cup. The third cup is what we call a kos shel bracha, the cup that we're going to say the grace after the meal, the Birkat Hamazon. And the fourth cup is said over Hallel. So really each one is unique, and therefore it's not really four cups, it's each individual. And from here, we get into a lengthy discussion about these pairs. So I just want to take a minute. We have mentioned witchcraft and demons before. We mentioned them in Masachet Brachot and also in Masachet Shabbat. It is interesting to think about, I would think that Judaism is not really superstitious. We learned in Masachet Shabbat, Ein Mazal Yisrael, that Jews are not under the auspices of the stars, or at least under the power of the stars. But it seems definitely from these dapim that the sages did give some sort of credibility, credence to demons or witchcraft. And I think the question is why. It could be, I think, answer number one, it could be just a reflection of the time. In those days, they might have been very superstitious. We'll go through there are a lot of superstitions here. We have seen them in previous Masechtot as well. So it could be that this is just a response to these superstitions. And we'll see, especially as we continue, right, there are sages who put these demons in place, right? You think you're so powerful, I'm going to limit your power, said the sages. So I think maybe on one hand, it is a kind of a sign of the times. On the other hand, I would like to suggest, and I think I've mentioned this before, I think that the Gemara uses witchcraft or demons, I would say specifically demons, as a way to explain the unexplainable. Or the things that we don't see. Especially, I like to say, in terms of health and sickness. Right? We know nowadays that there are bacteria and viruses and things that are microscopic. I think that in the time of the Gemara, it was easy to say, oh, there's a demon for that. We'll see in a minute, there are demons who hang out around the bathroom at night when you're walking alone in an alley. I think that it is a way to explain dangerous situations or things that we have seen that we can't explain. And it's easier to say, oh, there's a demon there. That's why it's dangerous. So sometimes I kind of change demon to bacteria or something unexplainable, something we don't understand in this physical world just yet, but there is some sort of metaphysical or spiritual explanation. So let's just go through, I'm not going to go through everything, but as I mentioned, the idea that things done in pairs are unlucky or dangerous, that the demons have some sort of power when things are done in pairs. I don't know the significance, if anybody has an idea of the significance of an even number as opposed to an odd number. We're going to get to Birkat Kohanim in a minute, which I thought was fascinating, so we'll get there in a minute. But we will, let's continue and see, let's see where we see pairs and where they're dangerous. Okay, so again, the Gemara talks about drinking in pairs, but then it says, oh, that's only if you're in your house, but not necessarily, like in your house it's okay, if you're outside it's not. If you are an Adam Chashuv, an important person, then you are actually also susceptible in your home. Again, I think maybe that goes to like Ayin Hara, right? When someone is important, they kind of attract attention, let's say, from people around them or metaphysically. The Gemara says that there's no problem with drinking 10 cups. Apparently, this was something that was done in the house of a mourner, and therefore the sages said that you can drink 10 cups of wine at the house of a mourner. Therefore, it's okay. But then, like 8 and down, all those are dangerous. And then the Gemara says, oh no, 8 is not a problem either. And here we get to the idea of the blessing that the priests give Bnei Israel, give the Jewish people. Just to remind ourselves, and we're going to have the verses here, but it's basically 3 psukim, 3 verses. The first one has 3 words, the next one has 5, and the next one has 7. So we're actually going to go backwards. So the Gemara says, 8 cups is not a problem. Why? Because cup number 7 breaks the order. Why does cup number 7 break the order? Because if you look at the last line of the blessing from the priests of Birkat Kohanim, Yisa Hashem panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom, right? God should gaze or turn his face towards you and place peace upon you, and the last word is shalom. So you see here it has 7 words, and shalom meaning peace, and therefore the 7th cup is a peaceful cup. It only brings good and kind of like breaks off, and therefore the 8th cup is also okay. So like because of this, 7 is okay because it's odd and it's shalom, and the 8th cup is then okay as well. The Gemara says, 6 is also okay. Again, as I mentioned, the second verse of the blessing is Ya'er Hashem panav elecha v'yichuneka, right? God should illuminate his countenance at you and be compassionate to you, or chen, be something like that, something about compassion. Be compassionate. So again, here is for good. Again, so 5 and now 6 are okay. So then the Gemara says, now 4 and 2 are a problem, and then the Gemara says, no. As I mentioned before, the first, right? We're going backwards. The first verse is Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, right? God should bless you and watch over you again, and therefore watch over you is number 3, and therefore that breaks up if you have 4 cups. So 3 plus 1, and therefore it's okay, and therefore 4 is not a problem, 3 is not a problem, so only 2 is a problem. So I thought that, again, that was interesting. Again, if we take a step back, I don't think this is just about numbers, right? I think that this is a beautiful way of understanding that Birkat Kohanim, the blessing that the priests give us, are a way to kind of watch over us in our lives, right? No matter what we're doing, even if we said that even numbers of drinking is dangerous, here we say, don't worry, because God is watching over us through the blessings of the Kohanim, of the priests. Okay, let's continue. The Gemara says that, wait, hold on 1 second. Okay, wait, we're not up to this yet, so I'll just leave this here for a minute. So we continue asking, we continue talking about demons, and there's a story of Ashmedai, who's the king of the demons, and he's in charge of things that come in pairs. And the Gemara says, well, is that good or is that bad? On one hand, it could be good because the king, we know kings don't have time to deal with every single little issue, and therefore it's good because he won't catch us. Or it's really bad because the king is very powerful, so you better watch out. Okay. Then the Gemara talks about if you walk down the street and you meet a witch. Again, I thought it was very interesting. You can tell her there's certain verses you can say, and these verses get rid of her. And then the Gemara continues and talks about these demons who hang around barrels that are open or barrels with special markings on them. Again, you should be very careful. Then there's an interesting story about a witch who's trying to harm harm an ex-husband, and he was being very careful not to drink. But then he started he started drinking many cups, and after 16 cups, he wasn't careful anymore, and then she got him in the end. I think anybody who's drinking 16 cups of wine at that point is opening himself up or herself up for complications as well. Okay. Anything that's made from human hands, like bread, you don't have to worry about these pears. Don't worry. But also, if you're a guest, you don't have to worry. So if you're a guest at the Seder, you also don't have to worry about this. Then there's this discussion at the end of 110 about drinking 2 cups before the meal and then 1 cup at the meal. Do those combine and now it's okay because now I had 3 cups? What about 1 cup before the meal and 2 cups at the meal? That's dangerous. And again, you should refrain or just have another cup and make sure that you are drinking in odds as opposed to in evens. Okay, we're moving on to Daf 111. And from here, we get into, since we're talking about, I guess, demons and witches, we go on to superstitions. What are things you have to be careful of? It doesn't say anything about stepping on cracks or black cats, but there are other things you have to be concerned about. So the Gemara says on the top of 111, there are 4 things that are very dangerous. If you relieve yourself between a palm tree and a wall, if you walk between 2 palm trees, apparently palm trees are dangerous. I would like to suggest it's because they have things that stick out of them, and that is dangerous. But I don't know. There's something superstitious about palm trees. If you drink from borrowed water, and if you pass like a puddle of spilled water, it seems that these things are dangerous. You should just know that demons do not travel on the road. They travel on the side of the road, and therefore it's dangerous to travel on the side of the road. Again, I would like to suggest it's the sage's way of saying stay on the path. Don't go off on the side, which is dark and dangerous. But, stay on the path. Again, the demons seem to be around this spilled water, but only if it wasn't covered with dirt. Then it's okay. If it's covered with dirt, or if the sun passed over it, then it's okay. Or if you're wearing shoes, it's okay. We're going to see later it's important to wear shoes. The next thing was other advice. There are certain things that shouldn't pass in between you. Like if you're walking with your friend, don't kind of pass these things in between you. A dog, a palm tree, a woman, these things are dangerous. So, stay to the side. Interesting, again, the palm tree. It's interesting because I always think of my name is Tamara, so I think of the Tamar, and I always think about Sadiq Katamar Yifrach, right? We say that the righteous person should flourish like the palm tree. So it's interesting that here there are some superstitions to the palm tree. So I don't know. You guys can think about it and get back to me what these are. And it seems there's also something dangerous about the stump of a palm tree. Here, I really was thinking that it's cut down. And again, we want the tzaddik to grow like the palm tree. So now I understand if it's cut down, that's not a very good sign. Okay. The Gemara then mentions the names of different demons under different trees. Why is this important? The Gemara says, well, if you want to write a kamea, we mentioned the kamea in Masechet Shabbat. The kamea was an amulet in the time of the Gemara, and I would say up until pretty recently, amulets have been worn or at least written. So these were parchments that generally had a pasuk, a verse. Sometimes, and you can see from this Gemara, sometimes it had the name of the demon that it was trying to get rid of. But that's why the Gemara says it's important to be aware of who was there. Okay, from here we're going to get into. I'm going to move on from the demons, if that's okay with everybody else. I am now going to move on to the sagely advice. There was a lot of advice in this week's dapim, and I thought it was just very interesting. I think on one hand they might seem arbitrary. On the other hand, I think there's great wisdom in many of them. So the Gemara talks about things that cause either blindness or poverty or anxiety, which I thought just very interesting that the Gemara was aware of anxiety. So I thought that was very interesting. If you comb your hair when it's dry, if you drink from the last drips of the wine from a barrel, that sounds a little unhealthy. I don't know what's at the bottom. If you put on your shoes when your feet are wet, interestingly, I think there's a lot here that one could think about. What do these things symbolize or imply? The next thing that the Gemara mentions is things that make a person poor, like if you hang bread in a basket. That reminded me of the baker's dream from Yosef, right? He has baskets in the air, so that was not good for him. There was no good ending for that story. And if you have like scraps of bread in your house, apparently if you don't eat everything, then that's going to lead you to poverty, interestingly enough. If you don't, the next thing the Gemara talked about was things that lead to anxiety, which I thought was interesting. Maybe if you do these things too much, if you apparently eating cress, if you bloodlet, again, if you're not careful, if you get a haircut and you don't wash your hands afterwards, if you put your hands to your mouth. I thought it was very interesting. There were a number of things that the importance of washing your hands after can lead to anxiety, which I thought was very interesting. One would think, frequent washing of hands, as we've seen this year with Corona. I thought that was just very interesting. Okay. We are now up to Daf 112. 1 second. Okay, some questions about demons. I'll get back to that at the end. Okay, Daf 112. The Gemara talks about not putting food and drink under your bed. It brings a ruach ra'ah. There's something, again, not healthy about it. Someone in my shir said, yes, it brings mice, so don't do that. But the Gemara talks about ruach ra'ah. There's some like either evil spirit or something that was not that's not good. You shouldn't drink water on Tuesday and Friday night. Again, there's something superstitious about those 2 nights. Interestingly, at the end of this daf, we're going to see a certain demon that was banished and was allowed to come out only on Tuesday and Friday night. So maybe that is connected to that. So I thought that was interesting. But if this happens, you can say a certain incantation and it's okay. The same thing, you shouldn't drink river water at night. Again, I think there are things swimming in there, so be careful. But if you do, there's something very interesting. The Gemara says, well, there's the demon of the river is called Shavriri. And the way you get rid of it is you basically break down his name. So Shavriri, Briri, Riri, and it goes on till it goes away. Just interestingly enough, this is the exact opposite of Nachman. So that is, right, you're building up. You want Rebbe Nachman of Breslov. Those of you who are not familiar with that, it's the I guess like the slogan of the Breslov Hasidim. They build up the name of Nachman. So the Gemara here talks about breaking down the name of the demon, and that is a way to get rid of the demons. Okay, the Gemara now goes to the poor person who needs 4 cups of wine. And the Gemara says, why are you telling me this? I know that everybody needs 4 cups. But the Gemara says that it's even according to Rabbi Akiva, who says, and this is explained a little bit more on this daf. Rabbi Akiva says it's very important to refrain from taking charity. He says you do not want to be a burden on the community, on the society, and therefore as we know, it's very important that Shabbat be a special day. And we talked about it, especially in Masechet Shabbat, about having special food on Shabbat and drink and making it very special. Rabbi Akiva says if you do not have enough money for that, it's better to eat a regular, humble, daily meal on Shabbat than to take money from tzedakah, from charity. But the Gemara is careful to say this is not the case with Pesach, and even a poor person needs to go and take from the charity in order to buy the 4 cups of wine. It is that important, and therefore he needs to have these 4 cups of wine. I heard a shir by Rav Asaf Bednarsh this week, and he said that this Gemara was misinterpreted by people who said, I should make my Shabbat like a regular day. And there are some people who felt that it was okay to work on Shabbat, lest they take money from charity, right? And we know definitely in the 20s and 30s and 40s, when the immigrants came to America and you needed to work 6 days a week, many people worked on Shabbat. And one of the ways that they I don't want to say justified, but they said, oh, Rabbi Akiva said, better to make your day, your Shabbat, like a weekday and not take from charity. So Rav Asaf Bednar said this was a misinterpretation. It's not what Rabbi Akiva said. I'm not judging anybody, just putting that out there. Okay. Other words of advice from the different rabbis in our daf. So here is some advice. You shouldn't learn at the highest point of the city. Again, it seems to be a place where it's distracting. A lot of people pass by, so that's not a good place for learning. Don't live in a place where people are, where the people who run the city, meaning the political leaders, are sages, Talmidei Chachamim, are learned men. There are interesting explanations for this. Either it's because they'll be so busy learning that they won't be able to rule the city, or the opposite, they'll rule so well, but you need to be very tough when you're a leader of the community. And we're concerned that people are going to say, oh, look at these sages, look how tough they are. And it then becomes a, I don't know if it's a Chilul Hashem, but definitely leads people to be critical of the rabbis. So maybe one should not mix politics and religion. As we have elections next week, we'll see how that goes. Okay, the next is, right, don't enter any house, even your own, suddenly. I think this is a brilliant idea, right? You don't know. It's always good to announce yourself before entering a house. You should always wear shoes. My parents were very particular that I was not allowed to walk around barefoot. So here, it's in the Gemara. You should always eat early, right? The importance of breakfast. The next one is, as we said, treat Shabbat like a weekday. Yes, Lynn mentions the same idea. Another idea is have 2 meals instead of 3 meals, correct? And the last is engage in business with a person who's having good luck. It kind of will lead you to good fortune as well. The next thing I thought was interesting is Rabbi Akiva was asked by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai to teach him. Rabbi Akiva was actually put in jail. He was imprisoned for teaching Torah, for teaching Judaism. That was against the rules. The Romans locked him up. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai came to him and said, please teach me. Rabbi Akiva said, what are you, crazy? I don't want to teach you, because if I don't want to teach you. I feel that I cannot teach you lest they find you and then they put you in jail. And Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says, no, I'm dying. I need you to teach me. And Rabbi Akiva says, really don't misinterpret. It's not that I don't want to teach you. I really want to teach you, but I cherish your life more. But in the end, he does give him some advice in terms of how to learn, how to teach his children. how to get married. He says that it's complicated if you married a divorced woman, even a widow. Again, I think that some of these things are difficult to hear. I think the idea is that these that I would say relationships are complicated. They come, everybody comes to a relationship with baggage, with certain past, and I think Rabbi Kiva was saying that somebody who is divorced or widowed is bringing even more than that. There were four things that Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi taught his children. Right, don't live in a certain town because there were people there who were bad influences. I think this idea that your neighbors will influence you, the idea of keeping up with the Joneses, is already in the Gemara, which I think is fascinating. And he talks about not sleeping on the bed of an Aramite woman, either like literally or figuratively. Here, there's an allusion to a story of Raf Papa. The Gemara does not explain the story, but it is brought down in Rashi, I think, and the Rashbam, that basically a non-Jewish woman in the town of Raf Papa, her child died, and for whatever reason, and she wanted to get back at Raf Papa, so she basically hid the dead baby under the couch, then invited Raf Papa in. He sat down, and she says, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe it! You just killed my baby." So the Gemara says from this, be careful, don't sit on the bed of non-Jewish women. Okay, the Gemara talks about paying your taxes. Make sure you pay your taxes. The importance of staying away from oxen. They are very dangerous. The other things that lead to tzaraat. Interestingly enough, we're always taught that tzaraat, leprosy, comes from, I would say it's a spiritual ailment because we speak Lashon Hara. Interestingly, the Gemara talks about specific things that if you eat them the wrong way, sleep on them the wrong way, they also lead to tzaraat. Again, not to sleep barefoot, not to walk around barefoot in houses, especially houses with cats, because they tend to kill snakes, and there might be some poisonous bones or what are they called? Fangs maybe around, or the opposite. Don't walk around barefoot in houses that don't have cats because they didn't kill the mice. They didn't kill the snakes, and it would also be dangerous. Anyway, lots of things that are dangerous. See Daf 112. Okay, let's move on to Daf 113, more sagely advice. There was a lot here, so you can go back and look at it. Right, don't live in a place where the horses don't neigh, where the dogs don't bark. It seems that it's something is wrong here, where the mayor is a doctor, which I thought was interesting. Also, don't marry two wives. I would say that is also good advice. They will drive you crazy. But if you have two wives, then at least marry a third. I guess I don't know why. It sounds like you would have more issues, but okay. I guess maybe they won't gang up on you. Don't take medicine if you don't need it. I thought that was very interesting. Don't provoke snakes. I don't know why the Gemara felt they needed to tell you that, but please don't provoke snakes or Gentiles or young students. Apparently, they will come back and seek revenge when they grow up. Some business advice on Daf 113. Some advice on going out to war. The Gemara says it's best to go, don't go out first, be the last to go out to war. Again, number 2 is what we've mentioned before, treat Shabbat like a weekday rather than take charity. Number 3, as we said, do business with someone who is doing well. The Gemara continues a few more things of advice. Right, 3 people get Olam Haba, who get, I guess, maybe a special place in the world to come. If you live in Eretz Yisrael, so here's a little Zionist push. If you teach your children to learn Torah, and if you make sure to leave wine over for Havdalah, right? You make sure that there's wine left over. These 3 things are, I guess, I think there's a lot we can talk about here, but kind of Zionism, the centrality of Israel, the centrality of Torah, the centrality of time, right? The idea of Kedushat Hazman, right? Shabbat and Havdalah. So lots of things here. Three people that Hashem loves. Right? Hashem loves people who don't get angry, people who don't get drunk, and people who don't stand on ceremony, meaning they are more easygoing. So I thought that was just very nice. Three people Hashem hates, which I thought is very, very strong language. People who are inauthentic, meaning their outside does not reflect their inside. People who don't testify when they can help somebody out. Or I would say, and people who testify, but they know that they're the only person who can testify. The Torah speaks about if you're the only one who is there who can testify about someone, it doesn't help testifying. You're basically what's called motzi shem ra. You're just talking bad things about people because there's no way to convict somebody with just one witness, and therefore, be careful before you testify for somebody or against somebody. There are three people that aren't worth living, people who are overly compassionate, who are easily angered, or who are squeamish. I thought that was interesting. And from here, as I was looking at my notes, it was interesting. The rest of Daf 113 has other like enumerations of things, but interestingly enough, it goes three things, four things, 5, 6, 7. So I thought that was very interesting, which I didn't realize when I was writing it down. But basically, 3 things hate each other, 3 things love each other, 4 things we don't understand about people, 5 traits of the Knaanim, of the Canaanites, 6 things about horses. Again, you can look all of these up. I'm sorry, I'm not bringing all of them. There's just a lot to do. 7 people who are excommunicated from heaven. So that was our 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And finally, at the bottom of 114, don't ask advice from astrologers. Again, as we mentioned, is there power of astrology over the Jews? It seems from here the Gemara is saying not. Okay, let's move on to 114. The last piece of advice is it is better to eat onions. It's better in Hebrew, right? But it says it's better to eat batzal, meaning onions, and sit batzel, and it's a play on words, and sit in the shade of your house, as opposed to eating very expensive food, and then you will have to basically hide from the collectors or be constantly running after money because you have very expensive habits. Right, so basically better to eat humbly and save your money than eat extravagantly and have to find money to buy all your fancy food. Okay, let us move on and start the Seder. So thank you for your patience. If anybody wants to see all the advice that was given, you can look in your Gemaras. We are now on 114 at the Mishnah, and we are finally starting our Seder. So the Gemara says that on Seder night, you dilute. Mazgu means to dilute and then pour the first cup of wine. This is what we say kiddush over, right? Kadesh. So you're going to say kiddush, and we now have a machloket between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. What is the order of kiddush? And this is, I think, a fascinating machloket. As I mentioned previously, it's always important when we have a difference of opinion to try to understand the deeper meaning behind the disagreement. So Beit Shammai say, first you should say kiddush, meaning sanctify the day, and then make the bracha over the wine, borei pri hagafen. Beit Hillel say the opposite. First say borei pri hagafen on the wine, and then you sanctify the day. The Gemara actually explains to us why. The Gemara says, well, Beit Shammai is because the day causes the wine to be brought, meaning the fact that tonight is Seder night, that's why you're bringing the cup. So therefore, first you should sanctify the day, and then you make the blessing over the wine. That's answer number one. Answer number two is because the day becomes holy from sunset, meaning the day has been sanctified already. So first sanctify the day, then make the blessing on the wine. Beit Hillel say, as we mentioned, the opposite. No. Why are we making kiddush? Because I have a cup of wine. Therefore, first make the blessing on the wine, then sanctify the day. And then answer number two, and this is a very, very famous concept, which is the frequency with which we do things. It's called tadir, something that is frequent. If it comes against something that is less frequent, right? Tadir, the she'eno tadir, something that is less frequent. Tadir kodem, we are going to do the thing that is more frequent. So Beit Hillel says, right, again, you can make a borei priagafen the whole week, right? You can drink wine every day, but kiddush you only make once a week. For a holiday, it's once every few months. And therefore, first you make the blessing on the wine, then you sanctify the day. And the Gemara says that the halacha is like Beit Hillel. So at Seder night, you can be aware of the kiddush that we say. First, we're going to say borei priagafen, and then we sanctify the day. Interestingly, the Gemara says, wait a minute, why do you need to tell me that that's the halacha? Don't we all know that the halacha follows Beit Hillel? Do you remember, those of you who studied Masechet Eruvin with me, we learned that a heavenly voice came out after 3 years of arguing between the two schools of thought. A heavenly voice came out and said the halacha is going to follow Beit Hillel, the school of Hillel. So the Gemara says, well, maybe this was written before the voice came out, or maybe it is for those who say we do not listen to heavenly voices when it comes to decreeing law. And this is a hint to a very famous story, which we have not learned together yet. It is a very famous story in Baba Metzia called Tanur Shel Achnai. There was a very famous argument about a certain oven, and in the end, the end of the story is it doesn't matter what the heavenly voice says, right? Because we say the Torah is lo b'shamayim hi. It is not in the heavens. God gave the Jewish people the Torah, the Jewish law, and a means in which to extrapolate and understand the law. And therefore, there is an opinion. There's a machloket, but there is an opinion that even if a voice comes out of heaven and tells us what the halacha is, what the law is, we do not follow that. We follow the rules set by man. So I think that is just fascinating. Okay, next we're going to move on. So we did Kiddush. Now we're going to move on to Karpas. Again, in between Kadesh or Chatz, we're going to wash our hands. We're going to talk about that on the next daf. But we're going to have Karpas. So we dip the Karpas, and then we eat the Maror. Again, the Gemara is going to tell us it's because we want the children to ask questions. After the Karpas, the Mishnah says that then you bring the matzah and the chazeret, which is the maror, and the charoset, right, which is sweet, and shnei tavshilin, right, and two cooked foods. We're going to discuss those two cooked foods in a minute. Okay. There's a machluket whether the charoset, if there's a mitzvah to eat the charoset or not. There's a machluket, and again, in the time of the Beit HaMikdash, in the time of the temple, they would bring the Pesach to the table as well. Again, because we have Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. Okay. From here, we get into a fascinating discussion, a very important discussion about intent. Do mitzvot, when I fulfill a commandment, do I need it to have intentionality or not? Do I need kavanah or not? And we're going to see that it's actually a machloket. A spoiler is the answer is no. You do not necessarily need intent. Obviously, it's better, but if you don't, it's still okay. You've still fulfilled your obligation. But Reish Lakish actually says on this daf on 114, he says you do need kavanah, you need intent, and he learns it from here with the fact that we have karpas and maror, and really you can use the same vegetable for both. Then again, we say, oh no, you can't prove it from here, because why do we dip it twice? Why do we bring it out twice? Again, so that the children will ask. As I mentioned in the beginning, that's going to be our theme for many things that we do on Seder night. We want to make sure that the children are asking questions, that they're involved. So we're going to do things that are normally not done. The Gemara says again, though it is still preferable that we use 2 vegetables, and that is actually the custom. We have either, I don't know, growing up, I always had parsley. Nowadays, people do potatoes, celery, I've seen, but the karpas is usually a vegetable, and maror is generally, again, either lettuce or the horseradish root. That is also maror. And the Gemara basically says it's better to use 2 separate vegetables, and this way we don't get into an issue of eating the maror as karpas. So we have karpas, we make the bracha borei pri ha'adama because it's a vegetable, and then we have maror, which we're going to make the special blessing of al achilat maror, right? It's a special obligation to eat maror. There's now a discussion at the bottom of 114 on what two foods do we bring to the table? Rav Huna says it could be anything. It could be beets and rice. It could be fish, or some say no, it should actually be 2 types of meat. Why? Because they are to remind us of the 2 sacrifices that were brought on the 14th of Nisan, the Korban Pesach and the Korban Chagiga. And therefore, in this picture, which is great, you see you have the zroa and the egg. These are 2 things that are put on our Seder plate to remind us exactly of these 2 sacrifices. The Korban Pesach, the shank bone, the zroa, is to remind us of the Korban Pesach, and the egg is to remind us of the Korban Chagiga. So that's why it's in the picture, and that's why it is on our Seder plate. Okay, the last daf, 115, moves on to Hillel. To the matzah, eating the matzah. And here we have Hillel. Now, don't be confused, because on this stuff we have 2 Hillels. We have Hillel the Amora, just to remind us, and the Amora is a sage in the time of the Talmud, who's much later than the Hillel that we know, who is a Tana. A Tana is a sage from the time of the Mishnah. So that is earlier. So Hillel the Amora, the later one, said that you shouldn't wrap your matzah with the maror, because these are 2 different obligations. We have a biblical obligation to eat the matzah, and it will be nullified by the maror, which is only by the bitter herbs, because that's only rabbinic in our obligation. Then the Gemara says, no, mitzvot, right? Different commandments do not nullify each other, so it's okay. And the Gemara brings a proof from the Hillel the Tana, meaning the earlier Hillel, the Hillel that we're familiar with, who would wrap the Pesach, the Matzah, and the Maror, right? This is what we do, right? This is korech. We do this, right? Zecher leHillel. We actually do this in our Seder, so we do wrap the Matzah and the Maror together. Or maybe the Gemara says that you should eat them separately. The Gemara says, no, you can eat them together, and you can eat them separately. And again, as I mentioned, that is korech. Okay, from here the Gemara talks about washing your hands when you eat food that is dipped in a liquid. And just for 1 second, we're going to return to the world of purity and impurity, of tum'ah and tahara. The Gemara says that the sages decreed that everybody's hands are what's called a sheni lituma, meaning they are a second degree impure, and therefore, if you touch truma, you would basically make it impure, and therefore the Gemara's decree, the sages decreed that you should wash your hands before eating. This is why, also, just to remind us, we wash our hands before we eat bread, because typically the bread that the priests ate was truma. It was challah, the challah that was separated, right, what we take off when we make challah, that was truma. And therefore, since the priests were eating bread that was truma, the sages decreed that you should wash your hands. Everybody needs to wash their hands before eating bread. So that was just a side. But this is why we wash our hands, or some wash their before karpas, that's urchat in our Seder. And of course, we're dipping the karpas into the salt water. We're going to dip the maror into charoset. And again, the Gemara says that you're going to wash your hands again before the second dipping as well. Even though we're, at the Seder, again, because you need to say the Haggadah and Hallel, and that was a big separation. That was a long, there was a long break, and therefore you have to wash your hands again. Yes. That's funny. The Hillel sandwich, exactly, Ilana. The matzah and maror together was like a sandwich. Okay, we talked about eating matzah and we talked about eating maror. What's interesting is the Gemara makes a distinction between the obligation to eat both of these things. The Gemara says that if you swallowed the matzah without chewing it, without tasting it, I don't know if you had a pill and you just swallowed it, you still fulfilled your obligation to eating matzah because you ate it, you ingested matzah. But for maror, you actually need to taste it. And I think that this makes a lot of sense, right? Because what do we say? The maror reminds us of the bitterness. It's only when we taste it are we reminded of the bitterness. So it's interesting, that distinction, that it's important that we taste that bitterness to remind us of the slavery. And then the Gemara finishes up on 115, that each person needs to have matzah, maror, and the charoset in front of them, or maybe only the person leading the Seder needs to have these things in front of him. Yes, Lynn mentions the idea of the bugs in the lettuce. I kind of skipped that, but you're right. The Gemara does mention that you dip it in the charoset because that's going to kill any bugs or worms that are in your lettuce. Please just check your lettuce before you put it on the table anyway. But yes, excellent. The last thing on the daf is, again, the idea of matzah. What is the reason that we eat matzah? There are three things given. It goes on to 116, but I'll just say it here, right? The matzah is called lechem oni. And the question is, why is it called lechem oni? Interestingly, how do you translate lechem oni? Either poor man's bread from the word ani, or oni from inui, which is bread of affliction. So that comes actually from this Gemara, right? Well, except for the first answer is right, she'onim dvarim, right, lechem she'onim dvarim. This is a bread that we decree things over, right? It's sitting at our Seder when we're talking about the Exodus, about leaving Egypt. That's number one. Number two, again, as I mentioned, lechem ani, as in a poor man's bread. It's broken into pieces, right? A rich person eats a whole loaf. At the Seder night, we actually break the matzah and we eat just from the matzah that was broken. Or again, like another idea at the top of 116 is that a poor man has very little kindling, and therefore, as he lights the oven, his wife is already preparing the dough quickly. The same thing as when we would make the matzah, we're doing everything very quickly, and therefore it is like poor man's bread. But again, as I mentioned, it is also the bread of affliction, right? Where we talk about the fact that we were redeemed on the night. Or that day on Pesach, and left Egypt early, and the bread did not have time to rise. With that, I wish everybody a Shavua Tov. We are going to continue and finish, so we have a lot to do next week. We're going to go through the entire rest of the Seder, the next 3 cups. We're going to talk about Magid. We're going to talk about what is the structure of the Haggadah. Very important things that I hope will enrich your Seder experience as well. And again, hopefully we will celebrate again next week as we finish and make a siyum together on the entire Masechet Pesachim. And I would like to add, I hope, if you don't mind, I will try to speak as quickly as possible. I would love to give you an introduction to Masechet Shkalim as well. The next Masechet is Masechet Shkalim, talking about the half a shekel that was collected from every Jewish person. So that will be next week as well. So we have a lot of things to do next week. So looking forward to learning with you then. Wishing everybody a great week.